Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome once again, or for the very first time, to the Farts and Craps Show, where today's segment is once again Stick Tips. Today is going to be episode 5 in my ongoing series looking at controllers and recommendations around said controllers. Today I'm going to be talking about the 8bitdo M30 2.4G as depicted here. And for this teardown slash fix, you are only going to need a T6 screwdriver, that is a Torx screwdriver, and maybe a Phillips head. I actually don't quite remember on that one. But yeah, the main barrier to entry here is going to be that T6. You can actually also use a T5 screwdriver, but I used the T6 50mm screwdriver for this one. And if you guys are curious about a decent set, I guess I could put a link down in the description for a Torx screwdriver set. The one that I picked up personally, it's been working very well, and it came with some nice other tools, so affordably priced too. So, but yes, for this, I'll talk about use case and all that stuff later. So, let's go ahead and go to the first step of the teardown. Essentially, you're going to have some of those T6 screws on the back. After we remove all of those, you're actually also going to need a little bit of prying force. This is the orange prying tool that actually comes with the set. So, because there are little clips, as you can see on the bottom and top of the shell, the outside of the controller shell, and that is mostly for a gaming smartphone clip, as is also sold by 8bitdo on Amazon. I wouldn't highly recommend it from what I've heard from people, but it does, and it doesn't really make sense with this version of the controller, because it does require either a USB connection or the dongle that it comes with. So it's not like you can Bluetooth pair it to your phone and have like the phone clip. I mean, I guess you could use an OTG adapter, because you can use it as a wired controller if you use the micro USB to USB-A, I guess, which you would then use an OTG adapter from micro USB to USB-A female. Although maybe if you can find a micro USB to micro USB male to male, you might be able to just plug it right in. I don't know. I have never even seen one of those before, and have not tried it. So, but yeah, upon getting to the inside of this controller, the first thing I noticed is the lithium-ion battery is actually like mounted very well to the PCB, which is actually thicker than what I was expecting. A lot of the PCBs I've seen for retro controllers are a bit more flimsy, but this felt like a very solid piece of tech. Like, even just unnecessarily thick, even in comparison to the last controller I did, the Nikon the Nikon asymmetric wireless controller, that's the name of that one. So that was nice, it felt very solid. And also the wires mounting the shoulder buttons, which have their own molded housing that's part of the shell, those felt higher quality as well. and they do have a certain, not really clickiness to them, but a very satisfying press and travel. I do like these shoulder buttons very much, especially in comparison to, let's say, the Retrobit reproduction Genesis controllers. So moving on, I did also open up the official Sega Genesis 3-button USB controller that comes with the Sega Genesis Mini, and I guess I could have picked a game from that library, and now that I think about it, that would make sense. But I'll explain stuff here in a bit. So the conductive rubber on the inside of this guy, it looked good, looked like quality materials, pretty similar to some of their other controllers. That is kind of 8bitdo's like secret. It's just slightly higher quality components, especially with the conductive rubber pads. They use very good ones in their controllers. Sometimes, other questionable designs, but I was also surprised to find how similar the conductive rubber pad is on here for the D-pad to the SNES pad. The molding and how it's mounted is a little bit different and definitely more solid on this pad. But for the people that are used to that Nintendo D-pad, it's going to feel a bit foreign because it is a very faithful Genesis design. So yeah, moving on once again, the other thing I noticed here, that this is the micro USB port on the top of the PCB there in the middle. I did notice mine was mounted a little crooked, which is strange. I don't know if I did that, which is a little worrisome because I do like to use this as a wired USB controller from time to time, or if that was just the way it's always been. I couldn't really tell. And upon opening the actual Sega 3-button controller for the Genesis Mini, it felt nowhere. The components just felt nowhere near as good. The board was much more simple, which is to be expected because there's fewer functions. The conductive rubber pads felt kind of cheap and just there. Very similar actually to a lot of the Chinese manufactured controllers I've taken apart and thrown away. Yeah, none of the pieces were interchangeable, so this controller ended up going in the garbage. Because I have absolutely no use for it. I don't like the way it feels. Everything about it feels low quality. Kind of the same issue I had with the SNES Mini controller, even though that was also officially licensed. Definitely not a good feeling pad, for sure. Okay, and here we have the fix I did, essentially. So, the main problem I had was when you shake the M30, it makes a lot of noise. At least mine did, after a good amount of use. At least 30, 40 hours of gameplay. The buttons just kind of rattle around way too much. And one day when I was playing Streets of Rage 4, my Y button just kind of stopped being snappy with me. And I like my buttons to be snappy with me, It just started feeling much more mushy and less responsive. So I thought, well, maybe I just need to get in there and clean the conductive rubber components, maybe add a little material, little mounting tack to the inside of the buttons so they form around it a little bit, And essentially that's what I did. I made like very tiny discs of mounting tack and laid them on the inside, making sure they didn't touch the rim of the plastic molding for the button itself, because it has to sit within its own molding there, which is very nice. It definitely does isolate the buttons very well. They don't feel like they're going anywhere. And as far as the D-pad goes, I wasn't really having an issue with it, but I did want it to feel like it was like in place a little bit better. And the original Sega Genesis controllers, back in the early 90s, well actually late 80s, I think, yeah, because even with the 3-button pad, yeah, they had a little ball bearing like in the middle of the D-pad. And there is actually nothing like that on this controller. Like, all the rotation was happening with the inner and outer clip. The outer clip being the actual D-pad material that your thumb interacts with, and the inner clip kind of being a mounting clip on the opposite side. And then in between is a convex dome where it rocks around, and you can see the 4 little plastic pads are actually the things. So it moves around as one piece. And then those plastic pads are pressing down the conductive rubber. So it's a very different design. And Sega did this because they were getting around the Nintendo patent of the D-pad. And they had to do something different to be like a competitor and to be like very different. Be like, hey, this is not, cannot be confused for Nintendo's D-pad. So I think that is all on this one. I do believe the PCB was very clean, so I didn't clean the PCB, but I did clean all the conductive rubber pieces, except for the middle 2 during the stage, the start button and the home, minus, and screenshot buttons. Also known as the heart, minus, and star buttons. And that's pretty much all I did. So after putting it back together, you definitely do, like, on each button, want to like hold it down pretty firmly and kind of like rock it around a little bit. What you're doing in this process is molding that mounting tack like to the opposite side of the conductive rubber, so it stays in place and keeps that kind of like snappiness. So when you shake it, like I'm doing right now, you guys can't see it, but it doesn't make a sound. Like, I'm just here, I'll even hit it against my hand. Nothing, So, yeah, that is absolutely everything. So let's get to the gameplay. And I'm going to show you guys a little bit of Streets of Rage 4 here. So, just as a little sound thing, what is... Okay, good, that doesn't do anything. So the A, B, and C buttons. All look and feel great, and sound great, actually. X, Y, and Z are the same situation. They have a more shallow feel to them. And they definitely have a different sound because they are smaller. But here, I'll do the same thing, even though it's going to trigger her special. Yeah, so Y, you're mostly using the BY thumb roll, very classic in this game, for your jump and your attack. So you're hitting Y a lot if you're sticking with that input method. You can also change to legacy mode, which is essentially going to be a 3-button layout, so it feels like the original Streets of Rage. But you can still do most of the stuff It's just you're going to have some overlapping inputs, like you press attack to pick up items, that sort of thing. I do like having them as separate buttons. It feels much better because there was a little bit of confusion with that in the original, and also we don't need HD Rumble here, and I don't think that this game actually uses HD Rumble. Just throwing it out there. But yeah, D-pad feels good. When you do your full circle rolls, Cherry does a weird little... it's quite funny. But yeah, hers is basically that short little... Like, I'm trying to do it more distinctively to the BY roll, but with the thumb. So it's just very quick. And I am using the 2.4 gigahertz wireless. Now Cherry, not Cherry, Blaze is a little short. So it's actually, she's a little too short to do this too. Oh, actually Friendly Fire is off, isn't it? Yeah, Friendly Fire is off, I think. Yes, it is. Turn it back on. I was like, that should be hitting our hitbox. But yeah, you can't do retro soundtrack in the battle mode, which is kind of annoying. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, it's just a nice little, like, boom, get it out of the way, start like an aerial combo sometimes, you know, like that. Or it's not fast enough. There we go. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you can do with that. I think you can only juggle... Yeah, doesn't work out. But yeah, I actually just went back, played Streets of Rage 2 for a few minutes. Just before playing this. And, games feel sluggish by comparison. Like, I've been playing a lot of this game. And yeah, no problem with the Y button since. Played another probably 15-20 hours, something like that, since I did this fix, because I really wanted to get some gameplay time in and make sure I was happy with the changes. But yeah, I'm using the wireless method right now, actually, so it's latency is actually quite good. It's a lot lower than Bluetooth, and there's no... I mean, especially with this device, it kind of depends on your firmware, but it's less of an issue with, like, repeated inputs getting ignored, like late polling behavior, that sort of thing. But yeah, I would have appreciated a wired version of this controller. That'd be very, very cool, and even better, like 8bitdo, if you guys happen to be watching this, PS4 adapter be great. Just like USB to USB, kind of like those Brook adapters, you know, but for your guys' controllers. On like PS4, Xbox One, I'm sure people would appreciate that. Especially PS4, please make that. Yeah, because I just want to be able to use these controllers on my more powerful PS4 Pro. I mean, I love my Switch, but part of the reason I bought this game on Switch instead of PS4 is because I can use my M30 2.4G, and that's no lie, because this feels amazing. Like a fantastic Genesis controller. But it has all the inputs. You know, it's got the home button, which is nice. It's got shoulder buttons. You know, it's got the minus. It's got, like, aside from analog sticks, it has all the buttons that a Switch Pro controller would have. So that's really cool. And actually, there's even a macro for switching the D-pad to one of the analog sticks, I believe. It might be only the left, but I think you can switch it to the right as well. I think it's like holding up and select for 5 seconds or something. You can also swap the AX and the BY. So instead of like B and Y being in the middle, I mean the buttons are going to be in the middle, but it would switch the functions with B and Y and X, A and X. So I don't personally know any games where that would be very beneficial. But if you want your confirm to be in the middle and your cancel to be on the left, that kind of makes sense, I guess. But back in the day on the Genesis, a lot of the times, confirm was A. So I don't really understand that one either. But yeah, also I did, as I mentioned, I did try a lot of other, I tried the, oh man, which ones did I try? So I tried the Bluetooth version of the Retrobit Saturn gamepad. I tried the USB version of that Saturn gamepad as well, the Model 2, and the Genesis 8-button controller from Retrobit. This one feels better than all of those, for a few reasons. One, the shoulder buttons, infinitely better. Two, the D-pad, which is integral to me. One of the main reasons to use this controller, because honestly, if it wasn't for that D-pad, I'm not a big fan of the button layout. I would prefer the ABXY of the Super Nintendo controller. But the Genesis D-pad is... it just feels right. And the Genesis controller just feels right for certain games that I know are like, this is a Genesis game, like Streets of Rage, you know? I mean, yes, it's Streets of Rage 4, it's a brand new game, but it's a game that feels like an arcade game. And to those of you who grew up like with arcade games, I think you guys know what I mean. So like Golden Axe, Street Fighter, you know, any of the arcade staples that were 6 buttons, you know. Actually, I don't know if Golden Axe was 6 button, but still, it's that 3 button, kind of like ascending button layout. I don't know exactly what people call it these days, but it's it just feels right. And yeah, that's going to be it for stick tips today, guys. So that is the 8bitdo M30 2.4G. Highly recommend it. I don't know if the Bluetooth version can be used in a wired format, but honestly, the wireless function of the 2.4 gigahertz side of things is really good. By the way, this controller boasts 20 hours of playtime-ish. So really good battery life too. I highly recommend, and as you guys saw in that picture, the battery isn't even that big. It's pretty small, so it's just a low power drain device, and I highly recommend this one. It's usually about $25. And that's the only problem I have with this one, is at first the D-pad felt a little floaty. Definitely get in there, clean the conductive rubber. Pads for sure. Again, when you clean the pads, make sure they dry completely. And don't dry with a cloth or towel, air dry those things. Because the littlest of fibers will fuck with conductivity, and anything you wipe it off with will leave trace amounts of dust or little fibers or anything of that nature. So, air dry. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, thank you guys for joining me on another edition of Stick Tips. I have been your host for this channel and this video, Dan Joe McCraps, and I hope you all have a magical day. Many blessings on your journey, and until next time, you know what to do.